final word on justice and charity cannot be a summary of arguments alone. It must be an appeal to the conscience. Fulton J. Sheen wrote in an era marked by World War, totalitarian regimes, and ideological promises that claim to deliver justice while quietly eroding human freedom. His concern was never merely political, it was moral. He understood that societies collapse not first from economic failure, but from confusion about the nature of the human person. Justice and charity, rightly understood, are not optional virtues. They are the pillars upon which any humane society must stand. Throughout his public life, Sheen fought relentlessly to expose the false promises of communism. He recognized that its appeal lay not in truth, but in its emotional power, its promise of equality without sacrifice, justice without virtue, and brotherhood without God. Communism claimed to correct injustice, yet it systematically stripped individuals of dignity, freedom, and moral responsibility. Sheen saw clearly that any system which denies the spiritual nature of man cannot ultimately serve man. Justice imposed by force, without charity, inevitably becomes tyranny. Justice, when separated from charity, grows cold and mechanical. It reduces people to functions within a system rather than persons with inherent dignity. Under communism, justice was defined by the state, enforced by fear, and detached from love. Yet this danger is not confined to the past. Whenever justice becomes purely procedural, concerned more with outcomes than with the moral means by which they are achieved, it ceases to be humane. Laws may be equal, yet hearts remain divided. Rights may be protected, yet souls remain neglected. At the same time, charity without justice degenerates into sentimentality. Sheen warned that love divorced from truth becomes indulgence, and mercy without moral order becomes a lie. Communism exploited this distortion by appealing to compassion for the poor while rejecting personal responsibility and moral law. Today, similar appeals are made under softer language and different banners. Emotional concern is elevated, while objective moral standards are dismissed as oppressive. Charity becomes a slogan rather than a virtue, and justice is redefined to mean redistribution rather than righteousness. Critics of Sheen's writing may argue that these warnings are outdated. Communism, they say, has failed. Its regimes collapsed, its economic promises exposed as illusions. But the failure of a system does not mean the failure of its ideas to seduce. What Sheen understood, and what remains profoundly relevant, is that the same errors return under new names. Socialism, in many of its modern forms, makes strikingly similar promises: security without sacrifice, equality without excellence, and justice without moral accountability. A new generation, distant from the historical consequences, is drawn once again to the illusion that systems can replace virtue. Sheen insisted that justice and charity must be properly ordered. Justice establishes what is due. Charity gives beyond what is owed. Socialism, like communism before it, seeks to reverse this order by enforcing charity through law. Yet charity that is compelled is no longer charity, and justice that ignores moral responsibility becomes injustice by another name. When the state assumes the role of moral provider, the individual is relieved not only of burden, but of virtue. True social renewal cannot be engineered solely through structures or policies. Sheen rejected the idea that injustice is purely systemic, and that moral transformation can occur without personal conversion. Institutions reflect the moral character of the people who build and sustain them. A society that demands justice while abandoning virtue will eventually demand control. In Sheen's time, this truth confronted collectivist ideologies. Today, it challenges the belief that technology, policy, or economic systems can substitute for conscience. Christianity offers a vision utterly distinct from ideological solutions. At the cross, justice and charity are not opposed, but fulfilled. Sin is neither ignored nor excused, yet mercy triumphs through sacrifice. This union reveals that love is not the elimination of moral law, but its perfection. Sheen understood that removing God from public life does not make society neutral. It makes it vulnerable. When transcendent truth is rejected, power rushes in to fill the void. Freedom, rightly understood, is inseparable from responsibility. Sheen warned that freedom without truth leads not to liberation, but to chaos. Both communism and modern socialist thought misunderstand freedom by redefining it as freedom from want, rather than freedom for moral good. Yet history demonstrates that when the state promises total security, it eventually demands total obedience. Responsibility cannot be delegated without consequence. Ideologies remain the great enemy of justice and charity because they reduce persons to categories. Whether defined by class, productivity, or identity, individuals become means to an end rather than ends in themselves. Sheen exposed this danger with clarity and courage. His warning applies with equal force today, as political and cultural movements increasingly divide society into opposing moral absolutes, each claiming justice while lacking charity. Yet Sheen's final word is not condemnation, but hope. Hope rooted in truth, not illusion. Societies can be renewed, but only when individuals choose to live justly and love charitably. No ideology can replace virtue. No system can absolve conscience. The future depends not on promises made by movements, but on moral courage exercised by persons. The reader is therefore left with a challenge that transcends generations. Are justice and charity lived realities or merely admired concepts? Are we willing to accept the discipline of justice and the sacrifice of charity? Or do we prefer systems that promise results without responsibility? Sheen's words endure because human nature has not changed. The names of the ideologies may shift, but the moral struggle remains the same. Justice and charity, united in truth, remain the only path to genuine freedom and lasting peace. It's time for the conversation that ties it all together. If you're in a group, now's the perfect time to grab your review questions and jump right into some awesome discussion. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and let's see what wisdom everyone brings to the table. The real magic happens when we learn from each other.